folks that have chosen to live here in retirement that are being preyed upon. I'm going to create a cyber crimes task force that has an economic crime impact to expand what we currently are doing in the area of economic crime prosecution, to make sure that we don't reject a case that comes through our doors or comes to law enforcement. So that cyber crimes task force will have the right technology experience, will have the right resources so that we can fully investigate them, gather the evidence, and prosecute those folks.
Thank you. Well, a lot of the things Dan's talking about we've actually been doing, and we've been doing very well for a long time. The gang problem has been a problem since I got here in the 90s and was on the gang task force. It's not been a huge dramatic increase. The demographics have changed. I mean, what essentially has happened is we started with the homegrown South County Sureños. Then a few years back we started getting LA gangs, and then now, once we sort of quashed those, now we're getting Norteños pushing in from the north. But the reality is we've been doing very well with those. But in terms of what I would do in the office, there is much to do. First off, we've just installed a new case management system, so we're completely managed in an automated way we haven't been before. We need to finish getting computers into the courtroom so that we're paperless. After that, what we have to do is actually reorganize the office entirely. How we're structured, how we're set up. Right now, the deputy DAs go to court about twice a week, and we're structured the way we were a long time ago, and we can be much more efficient. One, because of the case management system that we installed in the last year, and two, because of the additional efficiencies that we'll get once we start doing electronic discovery. We'll be paperless within the year. So between restructuring the office, we'll be able to address the problems that we have coming up with in terms of realignment, and that means what we're going to have to be doing is sentencing cases different, and we will completely restructure our sentencing. I'm sure I'll get a chance to talk more about that later.
Thank you, gentlemen. This next question, we will start with Tim. There has been considerable discussion about the experience each of you has relative to this leadership position of district attorney. How many people have you supervised in the last 20 or so years? And how many cases have you personally prosecuted over the last 6 or so years?
All right, we'll have to define some terms here. In terms of supervision, in the last 6 years, I've supervised in excess of 45 or 50 people. About half of those have been deputy district attorneys, both on the misdemeanor and the felony trial teams. The other folks are in the victim witness program, legal clerks, the data automation specialists, just about every type of employee in the office. I've had supervision authority over at some point in time and had to do evaluations and deal with the civil service process. I deal sometimes with discipline that we have to do in this county because we're a civil service county. In terms of prosecution, in the last, did you say 20 years? Prosecution, or 6? I'm sorry?
How many cases you personally prosecuted in the last 6 or so?
Okay, in the last 6, prosecuted is an interesting term. In terms of prosecutions, because I've been in the management side of things, I haven't prosecuted as many cases. What I can tell you is that I have tried the most complex jury trial in the last 6 years that's been done in the office. 5 defendants who tortured and murdered a 15-year-old girl in the Pomo, Destiny Myers. And that involved multiple trips to the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court on petitions. And so my trial work has been, and appellate work, has been in excess of most of the folks in the office in the last 6 years. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm an administrator and I'm a management.
All right, in terms of leadership experience, and I think this is an important question because we're electing a leader. We're not electing a trial lawyer to go into court and handle high-profile cases. The district attorney doesn't do that, but we lead an office of people that are capable and have the abilities to do that. In the last 21 years, I've been a leader. I made reference to that in my opening statement. In the military, they train you to be a leader from day one, even in basic training, when they give you a team to be in charge of. I've done that. I've supervised and managed hundreds of soldiers over the last 21 years. Most recently, my assignment in Iraq a few years back was I led a legal team of fellow lawyers and paralegal soldiers, and we had many other soldiers that we were responsible for. There were 3,000 soldiers in our brigade. I worked with the commander of that brigade to make sure that we followed through on all the discipline matters that arose in that brigade while we were in Iraq, and also advised her on international crime issues, international law related to our cooperation with the government of Iraq. But in terms of prosecution, I've handled some of the most difficult cases. In fact, I'm currently in the most difficult assignment that we have in the office, handling felony child sexual abuse, child molestation cases, dealing with victims of sexual assault, and felony domestic violence. In terms of cases, I have prosecuted thousands of cases in the last 6.5 years. I have handled them, and we're not talking jury trials, we're talking about the numbers of cases that I've prosecuted personally over the last 6.5 years. And I think we're out of time.
Thank you. Tim, I'm going to ask you to be first with this next question. Where do you stand on the use of plea bargains? Too many? Too few?
That's an interesting one to talk to the public about. There are a lot of misconceptions about plea bargains. The fact of the matter is plea bargaining is the system that we have. Plea bargaining is neither good nor bad. It is our system, and the only question is whether you're doing it correctly, whether you are disposing of cases or settling cases for the right reasons and for the right values, and that you're doing the right thing for the community in terms of public safety. So plea bargaining is a good thing, but in terms of our office, I can tell you that one of the things we've been doing is we've been, or I should say what we need to do going forward is change some of our plea bargaining. When I became the assistant district attorney and replaced the person who was here before me, I found that in general with felony cases, we are dismissing far too many enhancements. We are dismissing too many priors. And so plea bargaining is something that is going to need some restructuring, particularly in terms of realignment. And so what we need to do is do less plea bargaining with the most serious cases in our county. If people are state prison eligible under the new prison realignment system, they should be going to state prison. We shouldn't be plea bargaining them so that they end up at our county jail. And in terms of the lesser crimes, we're going to have to look at other ways to deal with those folks. So the plea bargains are going to have to deal with things like treatment programs and education. And we're going to have to make sure that people are not recidivating, that they're not reoffending in the way that they are now. That's the new system, the new paradigm that we have to live with because of realignment.
A plea bargain should probably more accurately be called a plea agreement. In a plea agreement, you have a defendant who's been charged with a crime, and he actually either admits guilt or pleads no contest to accept the sentence that has been promised to him. So quite frankly, in our system, in our society, we value and encourage people to take responsibility for their actions. That's why probably 98% of all cases, statewide, probably nationally, resolve with some kind of a plea agreement. So plea agreements are definitely an important part of our system. What's important is that we never, ever, ever compromise having a just outcome in a particular case. Our goal as prosecutors is to seek the truth and to seek justice in a case. What does that mean? Well, it all depends on a number of factors. You have to look at the seriousness of the crime, the impact on the victim. You have to look at the prior criminal history of the particular defendant that's being charged. We take into account many different factors to consider before ever agreeing with a defendant on a plea agreement. One of the most important things that we do is we consult with the victim, and we make sure that the victim is advised of what negotiations are going on, what kind of discussions are being had, because their input is extremely important and it's required under the law. My opponent mentioned that we need to change the way we do things and not have as many plea bargains, and I want to address that because if a case is eligible for state prison, they can't go to the county jail. We're not today plea bargaining cases that belong in the state prison by sending them to the county jail. Our men and women in our office, the 23 deputy DAs that are supporting my campaign, are working very, very hard. And they're going to make just decisions, and they're going to get a just sentence in each and every case, whether that means state prison or county jail.
Okay, thank you. This next question, we'll start with Dan. Please discuss how you plan to encourage your staff to step out of their comfort zone and take on bigger and more difficult challenges.
Well, that's a natural question for me. Being a military leader, I'm trained in identifying people's strengths and weaknesses and building a team to leverage all the strengths of every member of a team. In fact, corporate America, when they're recruiting people to be leaders in their corporations, where do they go? They go to the military. They find veterans, they find prior military officers, they look for people with leadership skills and the ability to lead an organization. And I'm proud of the fact that so many of my colleagues are supporting my campaign. And I'll tell you, it's because they recognize my ability to bring people together, to identify strengths and weaknesses of various colleagues and people, and come together to accomplish a mission. And so what I will do is I will continue to listen to my colleagues, listen to the folks in the office, to hear what their concerns are, and not just be a top-down leader that says, I know everything. A good commander in the military will ask his staff for courses of action, ask for information, different courses of action. You'll talk about it, you'll table it, and you'll come up with good ways to create solutions to problems. That's the kind of thing I'm going to be doing in this office, and the fact that I can do it from day one is because I have the support of my colleagues.
The fact of the matter is that to do those things, you have to know certain things. You have to have had the experience. And that is when you lead, you have to have actually done the very things that you're teaching, because if you haven't done those assignments, you can't teach. You know, professional development is what has been one of my priorities since I was promoted to chief deputy. And one of the things that I do is make sure that deputy district attorneys who come into the office have opportunities to try cases and to do things that they should do so that they can develop. So for example, just in the last year, we had a young deputy district attorney who lost a trial, lost a motion in front of a judge. I said, this is your opportunity to take a writ. I ended up pretty much writing that writ for that deputy, but a writ is a pre-trial appeal. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've helped young deputies try cases that they wouldn't have otherwise tried, file writs and challenge judges that they wouldn't have otherwise done, because that's our job. And I've also, with newer folks, with misdemeanor folks, they get stuck in misdemeanors for a while, so I've given them the opportunity to try felony cases from time to time, to work their way up slowly so that when they get there, they know how to handle those issues. And that's something I've been doing religiously for the last 6 years.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our timer, Mary Beth, by the way. I think she's doing a great job so far.
I can attest to that.
All right. Dan, if you would start with this question. Do you support capital punishment?
Capital punishment is obviously the ultimate punishment for a crime. And I think that because it is a permissible and a legal punishment under the law in California, that it needs to be very seriously considered. But it needs to be reserved for only the very most egregious, clearly, the most egregious and heinous of cases. Anytime that you're weighing and balancing taking one's life, no matter what they did, it should not be an easy decision to make. And so it's very important that in a district attorney's office, that the decision is not made in a vacuum, but it's made by consulting with the other folks in the office, the other management people, the trial attorney who's handling that case. There are times when, say somebody's in the state prison, has committed a crime and he's there for life. Well, if he wants to kill his cellmate just because he doesn't want to have somebody in the cell with him, what do? He's already serving a life